Mom carved the turkey like she was severing my life's final tether. She smiled warmly and said, "Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure." The table laughed. I just stood up. She thought she had won, but she did not know what I discovered 3 weeks ago. I found a secret big enough to not only ruin Thanksgiving, but to burn her entire precious legacy to the ground. I am Madeline Price. And sitting at this dining table felt less like a holiday celebration and more like a high-stakes deposition where I was the only one not briefed on the defense strategy. The dining room of our ancestral home in Willow Crest, Wisconsin, was a masterclass in aggressive perfection. Outside, the world was vanishing under 6 inches of fresh powder, the kind of aggressive mid-November snow that turned the landscape into a blank sheet of paper. Inside, the heating system hummed a low, expensive note that kept the temperature at exactly 70 degrees. The air smelled of sage, roasted poultry, and the metallic tang of old money polishing its own reflection. I sat in the middle of the long mahogany table. This was the purgatory seat. I was 34 years old, a forensic audit specialist for one of the largest firms in Chicago. Yet in this house, my placement at the table still screamed that I was an afterthought. I was not important enough to sit near the head where the decisions were made, nor was I irrelevant enough to be shoved down to the kid's end near the kitchen door. I was just there, present, a variable that had not yet been solved. I wore a charcoal silk blouse and tailored trousers. Simple, sharp. My mother hated it. She preferred pastels and softness, things that suggested a woman's primary job was to be decorative. At the head of the table, my mother, Veronica Price, stood like a monarch addressing her court. The crystal chandelier above her seemed to pull all the light in the room and focus it directly onto her silver hair, which was coiffed into an immovable helmet of dignity. She held the carving knife and the large two-tined fork with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. In the Price family, carving the turkey was not a chore. It was a rite of passage, a declaration of dominance that only the worthy matriarch was allowed to perform. To her right sat the golden tableau. My sister, Caroline, her husband, Graham, and their son, Oliver. Caroline was a vision in oatmeal-colored cashmere, her hair falling in soft, heat-styled waves that surely took 2 hours to perfect. Her hand rested possessively on the back of Oliver's neck, a constant physical reminder of her contribution to the dynasty. Graham sat beside her, looking handsome in that vague catalog way, though his smile never seemed to reach his eyes. I took a sip of water, the crystal glass cool against my palm. My gaze drifted to Oliver. He was 7 years old, picking at his roll, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that served as the true main course of every Price family gathering. Looking at him always triggered the glitch in my brain. Suddenly, I was not in the dining room. I was back in the sterile white box of a hospital room 2 years ago. The air there had smelled of antiseptic and latex. I could hear the rhythmic beeping of the monitor slowing down, fading out, like a clock winding down to 0. I remembered the cramping, a physical agony that felt like my body was wringing itself out, but the emotional evisceration was worse. I remembered my mother's hand over mine. Her skin had been dry, cool, and paper-thin. She had leaned in close, her voice a whisper of prayer, but when the doctor confirmed there was no heartbeat, I saw it. I saw the muscles in her face relax. I saw a flash of light in her eyes that looked terrifyingly like relief. "It is God's will," she had said then. "Some things are not meant to be." Back in the dining room, the glint of the carving knife snapped me back to the present. Veronica cleared her throat. The sound was delicate, but it commanded immediate silence. Even the clinking of silverware ceased. "Before we eat," Veronica began, her voice projecting with the practiced cadence of a woman who sat on 3 different charity boards, "I want to take a moment to look at this table, to look at what we have built." She gestured with the knife, the blade catching the candlelight. "The Price name has stood in Willow Crest for over 100 years. We are not just a family. We are an institution. We are the guardians of a legacy." Her eyes misty with self-importance. She looked lovingly at Caroline. We survive because we know what is valuable. We know what to protect. We know that quality matters more than quantity. I kept my face neutral, a skill I had honed in boardrooms while presenting evidence of embezzlement to hostile CEOs. I knew what was coming. It was the annual lecture on standards. Veronica turned her gaze to Oliver. And to see the future sitting right here, so bright, so perfect, it reminds us of our duty. Then, the knife point drifted. It moved through the air and settled in my direction. Veronica looked at me. Her expression was beatific. It was the face of a saint on a stained glass window, benevolent and terrifying. "And I want to say something special to you, Madeline," she said softly. My stomach tightened. I braced myself for a comment about my job, or my lack of a husband present, or my charcoal blouse. "I am truly grateful for your miscarriage, dear," she said. The words hung in the air, suspended in the silence like dust motes. They were spoken with such warmth, such tender affection, that it took a full 3 seconds for the meaning to land. "Excuse me?" I whispered, though I'm not sure any sound came out. Veronica smiled, a genuine, terrifying curving of her lips. "I mean it. I was thinking about it just this morning. Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and prickly. Pure. The word echoed in my skull. She was not just talking about biology. She was talking about control. She was talking about the erasure of a mistake. Then the sound returned. It started with a chuckle from Aunt Sarah, sitting 3 seats down. It was a nervous sound at first, but then Uncle Robert joined in, tapping his fork against his wine glass in a gesture of agreement. "Veronica always has a way with words," someone mumbled approvingly. I looked at Caroline, my sister, the woman who had held my hand when I cried about the empty nursery. Caroline picked up her wine glass, swirled the red liquid, and offered a light, tinkling laugh. "Well," Caroline said, her voice breezy and light, "Mother is right. 1 complete grandchild is quite enough for us to handle, isn't it? Quality control." The table erupted into polite, agreeing laughter. They were laughing. They were actually laughing. It was a sophisticated, social noise, the sound of a group agreeing that my tragedy was actually a blessing for the collective brand. I looked at Graham. He was not laughing. His jaw was set tight, and his eyes darted from Caroline to me with a flicker of something that looked like nausea. But he said nothing. He picked up his wine and drank, swallowing his spine along with the expensive Merlot. My hand was trembling. I looked down at my plate. My fork clattered against the fine china, the sound sharp and discordant against the laughter. "Pure, thanks to your miscarriage." The pain hit me first, a sharp, physical blow to the chest that made it hard to breathe. It was the grief of 2 years ago, ripped open and salted. But then, something else happened. It was a sensation I knew well from my work. It was the moment the numbers stopped being abstract and started forming a pattern. It was the moment I looked at a ledger and realized the chaos was not incompetence, but intentional design. The heat in my chest evaporated. It was replaced by a sheet of ice. My heart rate slowed down. My vision sharpened. The tears that had been threatening to spill receded, pulled back by a sudden, overwhelming clarity. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. I saw the tightness around her eyes, the desperate grip on the knife handle, the performative joy. I looked at Caroline's forced nonchalance. I looked at the way Graham refused to meet my eyes. This was not a family dinner. This was a crime scene. And for the first time in 34 years, I was not the victim. I was the auditor. I placed my napkin on the table next to my plate. I did not crumble it. I folded it. The movement was precise, deliberate. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh sound that cut through the last of the laughter. The room went quiet again. But this time, the silence was different. It was awkward. They were waiting for me to cry. They were waiting for Maddie, the emotional mess, to run away and cry in the guest bathroom so they could shake their heads and talk about how unstable I was. I stood up to my full height. I smoothed the front of my charcoal trousers. I looked directly at Veronica. I did not frown. I did not scream. I lifted the corners of my mouth into a smile. It was thin, razor sharp, and completely devoid of warmth. It was the smile I gave a CEO right before I handed over the file that would send him to federal prison. "Enjoy the turkey," I said. My voice was steady, level, and cool. I turned my back on them. "Oh, let her go." I heard my mother sigh behind me, her voice dripping with performative pity. "She has always been so fragile. It is exactly why she could not carry." Her voice faded as I walked out of the dining room, past the foyer, and toward the coat rack. I grabbed my coat and my bag. I did not run. I walked with a measured, rhythmic pace. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally cut me out, shamed me into silence, and solidified their perfect little narrative. They thought I was fleeing the pain. But as I stepped out onto the porch, the cold Wisconsin air hitting my face like a wake-up call, I took a deep breath. The snow was falling harder now, covering everything in white, hiding the dirt. I was not running away. I was going to work. Veronica Price wanted a pure family line. She wanted to talk about what was hidden and what was revealed. Fine. I walked to my rental car, unlocked the door, and sat in the driver's seat. I stared at the house, glowing warm and golden against the blue-black night. It looked beautiful. It looked perfect. It looked like a lie. I started the engine. The heater roared to life. I was not just Madeline the daughter anymore. I was Madeline Price, the woman who found the bodies buried in the numbers, and I was going to audit this entire family down to the last penny and the last drop of blood. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. The investigation had officially begun. The silence in my car was absolute, save for the rhythmic thrum of the tires against the packed snow. I drove without turning on the radio, letting the white noise of the engine fill the space where my family's laughter still echoed. But as the miles between me and the ancestral house stretched out, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the heavy, suffocating weight of memory. You do not grow up in the Price household. You are curated. My childhood was less about play dates and scraped knees, and more about the rigorous study of our own mythology. I could remember being 6 years old, sitting on the Persian rug in the library, while my mother, Veronica, stood before the oil painting of my great-grandfather. She would gesture to the canvas not with affection, but with the strict precision of a museum docent. "We are the pillars. Madeline," she would say, her voice echoing off the mahogany shelves. "The Price Foundation is not just charity. It is the mortar that holds Willowcrest together. Without us, this town is nothing but a zip code in the middle of a cornfield. We have a duty to be better, to look better, to be the standard." Even then, the sorting process had begun. It was subtle, like the slow erosion of a coastline, but by the time we were teenagers, the roles were cast in iron. Caroline was the heir apparent. She was given the piano lessons, the etiquette coaches, and the dresses that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. She was taught how to stand in a receiving line, how to smile without showing her gums, and how to defer to mother in public while subtly asserting dominance in private. Caroline was the show pony, groomed for the center ring. I was the draft horse. "You are so much better in the background. Maddie," Mother would say when she steered me away from the drama club and toward the math league, "you have a mind for details, for logic. You are not made for the spotlight. Darling, the light washes you out. You are better suited for the shadows where the real work happens." She was right, of course, though not in the way she intended. I retreated into numbers because numbers did not lie. Numbers did not smile to your face while judging your bone structure. If a balance sheet did not align, it was not a matter of opinion. It was an error to be found and corrected. That compulsion to find the error led me to Chicago, to Northbridge Analytics. While Caroline was busy marrying Graham, a man whose pedigree was impeccable even if his personality was as bland as unbuttered toast, I was buried in spreadsheets, hunting down corporate fraud. I became a forensic auditor, a professional excavator of other people's secrets. I spent my days tracing wire transfers through shell companies and exposing executives who thought they could hide their greed in the footnotes. I was good at it. I was ruthless. But deep down, I wanted something that did not require an audit. I wanted something that was just mine. 2 years ago, I thought I finally had it. I remembered the afternoon I bought the onesie. It was a Tuesday, gray and rainy in the city. I had slipped out of the office during lunch and wandered into a boutique in Lincoln Park. I did not know the gender yet, so I bought a soft, pale yellow cotton suit with a tiny duck embroidered on the collar. It was simple. It was cheap. It was the most valuable thing I owned. I had hidden it in the bottom drawer of my dresser, beneath my winter socks. I had written an email to Jack, my husband. He was away in D.C., consulting on an environmental law bill, exhausted and overworked. I wanted to tell him in person, but I needed to get the words out, so I typed a draft. Subject: a new project partner. Body: we are going to need a bigger apartment, and maybe a lot less sleep. I love you. Dad. I never sent it. The memories shifted, darker now, like ink spilling across water. I had gone home to Willow Crest for a weekend visit just a few weeks into the pregnancy. I had not told Mother yet, but she had guessed. Veronica always knew when bodies were changing. She studied us like livestock. She had not congratulated me. Instead, she had frowned, touching my forehead with a cold hand. You look pale. Madeline, she had said, you look anemic. You are working too hard in that city. Your body is not strong enough to hold this on its own. She had insisted I see Dr. Aris. He was the town's most prestigious physician, a man who had delivered Caroline and treated my father's heart condition until the day he died. He was a fixture at the Price Foundation galas, always lingering near the open bar with a smile that showed too many teeth. He had prescribed me a prenatal vitamin, a special compound, he had called it, something to boost my iron and progesterone, just to be safe. Mother had said, we have to be careful with your history of fatigue. I took them. I took them because I wanted to be a good mother. I took them because, despite everything, a part of me still wanted Veronica Price to look at me and nod in approval. The cramping started 4 days later. It was not a sharp pain at first. It was a dull, heavy ache, like a stone sinking into the pit of my stomach. I was still at the house in Willow Crest, lying in the guest room, my old room, stripped of all my childhood posters, now just a beige box. The pain grew until it felt like my insides were being twisted by a wet towel. I remembered the rush to the hospital. I remembered the lights blurring overhead. But mostly, I remembered the quiet moment after the chaos, when the sedation was pulling me under but my mind was still fighting to stay afloat. I was lying in the hospital bed, my eyes heavy, feigning sleep because I could not bear to face the reality of the empty space inside me. The door had creaked open. I heard the click of heels, Mother, and the heavy shuffle of dress shoes. Dr. Aris. They stood by the foot of the bed. I kept my breathing shallow, rhythmic. It is a tragedy, Dr. Aris had said, though his tone lacked the vibration of sorrow. It is a mercy, Veronica had replied. Her voice was not sad. It was factual. It was the voice she used when deciding which antique chair to reupholster. She is not like Caroline, Mother had continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that drifted across the sterile room. Her blood is complicated. We cannot risk the dilution. The foundation needs a clear line. This is for the best. Doctor, a clean slate. The family line remains intact. At the time, through the fog of anesthesia and grief, I convinced myself I had hallucinated it. It was a nightmare born of trauma. My mother was cold, yes, but she was not a monster. She would not stand over the wreckage of my unborn child and call it a mercy. So I buried that memory. I categorized it as data corruption due to shock. I blamed myself instead. I blamed the stress of the audit season. I blamed the long drive from Chicago. I blamed my own body for being the weak vessel my mother always said it was. When Jack flew in, his face gray with worry, I told him I was sorry. I apologized for failing him. Mother was there to catch the narrative and mold it. God has a plan. She told everyone. Madeline was just too fragile. Her lifestyle is too chaotic. And then, 6 months later, Oliver was born. If my miscarriage was the tragedy, Oliver's birth was the coronation. The moment that boy took his first breath, he became the center of the Price universe. He was a beautiful baby, objectively, but to Veronica, he was not a child. He was an artifact. She obsessed over him. She did not just love him, she inspected him. Look at that nose. She would coo during Sunday lunches, ignoring the fact that Oliver was smearing peas on his bib. That is the Price nose, straight as an arrow, and his eyes, blue as the winter sky. Thank goodness. She never finished the sentence, but we all heard the silent ending. Thank goodness he does not look like whatever Madeline would have produced. Jack tried to shield me. He hated going to Willowcrest. He would squeeze my hand under the table when the comments started, his thumb rubbing circles into my palm. But Jack was busy. His firm was pushing him toward partnership, and he was burying himself in work to cope with his own grief. We were two ships drifting apart in a sea of unspoken pain, and Veronica was the lighthouse guiding us onto the rocks. I began to feel like a ghost in my own family. I was the cautionary tale. Caroline was the Madonna, and I was the barren wasteland. But the auditor in me never truly sleeps. Over the last few months, that buried memory of the hospital room began to claw its way to the surface. It started as a nagging feeling in the back of my neck whenever I saw Dr. Eris at town events. It grew when I noticed how quickly the paperwork for my medical incident had been filed and sealed. Why had there been no follow-up? Why had Dr. Eris insisted I stop taking the vitamins immediately after the loss, claiming they were no longer necessary, without ever tapering the dose? Why did my mother look at me not with sympathy, but with the satisfied calm of a gardener who had successfully pruned a wayward branch? I pushed the thoughts away. It was too horrific to consider. To believe that my mother had a hand in it, that she viewed my child not as a grandchild, but as a contaminant to be flushed out. That was madness. That was the plot of a novel, not the life of a forensic accountant from Chicago. But tonight, she had said it. Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure. The car hit a patch of rough ice, and the steering wheel jerked in my hands. I corrected it instinctively, my heart hammering against my ribs. That sentence was the missing key. It was the final variable that made the equation balance. It was not a hallucination in the hospital. It was a confession. She had not been praying for me. She had been thanking the doctor for a job well done. I pulled the car over to the shoulder of the highway, the headlights cutting a cone of illumination into the swirling white void. My breath fogged the windshield. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought about the vitamins. I thought about the special compound. I thought about the way Caroline looked at Oliver, not just with love, but with a desperate, terrified sort of ownership, as if she knew her position as the golden daughter depended entirely on that little boy's genetic resume. I was not crazy. I was not fragile. I was a victim of a corporate restructuring. Only the corporation was my family, and the asset being liquidated was my child. Tears finally came, hot and stinging, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of rage, pure, distilled, high-octane rage. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened the calendar app and scrolled back 2 years. I found the dates. I found the appointment with Dr. Eris. I found the refill dates for the prescription. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Okay, I said aloud to the empty car. You want to talk about purity? You want to talk about what belongs in this family? I put the car back into drive. The tires spun for a second before catching traction on the asphalt. I was going back to Chicago, but I was not going back to my life. I was going to open a new case file. And this time, I was not just looking for financial discrepancies. I was looking for a biological crime. The audit was no longer just about money. It was about blood. And I was going to make sure that by the time I was finished, the Price family line would wish it had never been drawn. I stopped in the living room. The threshold between the suffocating heat of the dining room and the freedom of the snowy night outside. The room was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the street lamps filtering through the sheer curtains and the dying embers of a fire no one had tended to in hours. I stood there, my coat heavy in my arms, listening. From down the hallway, the sounds of the dinner party continued. I could hear the clink of silverware against china, the murmur of voices, and then a burst of laughter. It sounded grotesque, like a laugh track played over a funeral scene. They had already moved on. My mother had insulted my dead child, and within 5 minutes, they were likely discussing the texture of the cranberry sauce. I should have kept walking. I should have opened the heavy oak door and never looked back. But my feet felt leaden, rooted to the expensive Persian rug. Maddie. The voice was low, strained. It did not sound like family. I turned. Graham stood in the archway connecting the living room to the foyer. He looked like a man who had been awake for a week. His tie was loosened, hanging slightly askew, a subtle rebellion in a house that demanded geometric perfection. I braced myself for the standard apology. I expected him to say he was sorry, that Veronica did not mean it, that the wine had gone to her head. I prepared my face to be a mask of indifference. But Graham did not apologize. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not even look at me at first. He stared past my shoulder, his gaze fixed on the sliver of light coming from the dining room door, as if he were watching a house burn down and trying to decide whether to call the fire department. Pure, Graham said. The word sounded like he was spitting out a piece of gristle. She actually said pure. I gripped my coat tighter. Go back inside. Graham, eat your turkey. Pretend you didn't hear it. That is what you are good at, isn't it? He finally looked at me. His eyes were not soft. They were hard, rimmed with red, and filled with a frantic, terrifying clarity. I can't, he said. Not this time. He walked further into the room, stepping into the shadows where I stood. I have put up with her control for 8 years. I have watched Caroline play the role of the perfect doll. I have smiled when your mother told me how to dress, how to invest my money, how to raise my son. I swallowed it all because I thought it was just the cost of doing business with the Price family. But pure? He let out a short, sharp breath that was not quite a laugh. That is rich. I frowned, my auditor's instinct twitching. This was not just husbandly frustration. This was data leaking from a contained system. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice dropping to match his volume. Graham reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. His hand was trembling. He pulled out a rectangular box wrapped in plastic. He held it out to me, but he did not let go of it immediately. It was a generic DNA testing kit, the kind you buy at a pharmacy counter along with toothpaste and razors. I bought this 3 months ago, Graham whispered. I have carried it in my briefcase every single day, and every day. I tell myself I am paranoid. I tell myself I am a bad father for even thinking it. But then your mother talks about purity, about the timeline, about the bloodline. I looked at the box, then back at him. Oliver? Graham nodded. The motion was jerky, mechanical. He doesn't have my ears, Graham said, listing the evidence like he was reading an indictment. He doesn't have my eyes. Those are subjective, I know. But last year, when he had his tonsils out, the nurse mentioned his blood type. Type A negative. I am O positive. Caroline is O positive. I froze. Biology was not my field, but I knew enough to know that 2 O parents could not produce an A child. It was a genetic impossibility. It was a discrepancy in the ledger that could not be explained away by a rounding error. Does Caroline know? I asked. Caroline knows what she wants to know, Graham said bitterly. She lives in a world where if you ignore a problem long enough, it ceases to exist. But I have been watching her. I have been watching where she goes on Tuesday nights. He took a step closer, lowering his voice until it was barely audible over the wind rattling the window panes. She says she goes to a prayer group, a private spiritual counseling session at Redeemer Oaks Chapel, with Pastor Lucas Hale. The name landed between us like a grenade. Lucas Hale, the charismatic, handsome young pastor who had revitalized the local church, the man my mother praised constantly for his spiritual vigor. I checked the church schedule. Maddie, Graham continued, his voice cracking. There are no prayer groups on Tuesday nights. The church is closed, but her car is always there. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow outside. This was not just an affair. This was a structural collapse. If Oliver, the golden child, the pure heir my mother worshipped, was the product of an affair with a local pastor, the scandal would not just hurt the family. It would obliterate the Price Foundation's reputation. It would destroy the narrative Veronica had spent 40 years writing. Why are you telling me this? I asked, stepping back. I am the outcast, remember? I am the nobody with the failed pregnancy. I am leaving, Graham. I don't want to be part of this. Graham shoved the box into my hands. Because you are the only one who isn't drinking the Kool-Aid. Maddie, you are the only person in this house who looks at facts instead of fantasies. I am not a detective, I hissed, trying to shove the box back at him. Do it yourself. Swab his cheek and send it in. I can't. Graham's voice rose, desperate and raw. He caught himself, glancing fearfully toward the dining room, then continued in a fierce whisper. I can't do it. I look at him, and he smiles at me, and I lose my nerve. I love him. Maddie, God help me. I love him even if he isn't mine. I need someone who can be objective, someone who can do the math without crying over the numbers. He looked at me with a pleading intensity that made my chest ache. You are a forensic auditor. That is what you do, right? You find the truth when everyone else is lying. You are the only one cold enough to handle this. Cold enough. The words stung, but they were true. I was the cold one. I was the one who didn't cry at the dinner table. I was the one who walked away. I looked down at the DNA kit in my hands. The plastic crinkled under my thumb. If I walked away now, I could go back to Chicago and pretend this night never happened. But the auditor in me was already engaged. The anomaly had been flagged, the blood type, the timing, the mother's obsession with the child. And then I thought about what my mother had said. Thanks to your miscarriage. She was so proud of her pure bloodline. She was so smug about her genetic superiority. What if the only pure thing in this house was the lie? I looked up at Graham. His face was a map of misery. He was a good man trapped in a bad play, waiting for someone to drop the curtain. If you are wrong, I said slowly, you destroy your marriage for nothing. If I am wrong, Graham said, his shoulders sagging, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to her. I will be the best husband on earth. But if I am right, then at least one person in this house has to look the truth in the eye. I can't live in the dark anymore. Maddie, it is suffocating me. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs. I made my decision. We don't do it now, I said. My voice was clipped, professional. It's too risky. Caroline is hovering over him. Graham blinked, surprised by my shift in tone. Then when? Tomorrow, I said. You bring him by the hotel before you leave town. Tell Caroline you are taking him to get hot chocolate. I will meet you. We will make it a game. I have some sterile swabs in my car kit. Don't ask why. We will tell him we are testing to see if he has the superhero gene or something ridiculous. He won't know. He won't be scared. Graham let out a breath that sounded like a sob. You will do it? I will collect the sample, I said. I will send it to a private lab I use for work. It is faster, and it is discreet. The results will come to me, not to the house. No one intercepts the mail. Thank you, Graham whispered. Maddie, Don't thank me, I cut him off. I am not doing this for you, Graham, and I am certainly not doing it for Caroline. I tucked the DNA kit into my large leather tote bag, burying it beneath my scarf. I am doing this because I want to see the ledger, I said. I want to see exactly what this family is worth. Graham nodded, looking exhausted but relieved, like a man who had finally handed over a heavy suitcase he had been carrying for miles. He glanced back toward the dining room. "I have to go back in," he said, "before they wonder where I am." "Go," I said. "Act normal. Drink the wine. Let Mother lecture you. Do not let Caroline see you looking at her sideways." He squeezed my shoulder briefly, a clumsy, desperate gesture of alliance, and then turned back into the darkness of the hallway. I watched him smooth his hair, adjust his tie, and put his mask back on before stepping into the light of the dining room. I was alone again in the dark living room. I turned toward the front door, but my eyes caught the large portrait hanging above the mantel. It was a family photo taken 5 years ago. My father was still alive then. Veronica sat in the center, regal and imposing. Caroline stood behind her, glowing. I was off to the side, half in shadow, my smile tight and uncomfortable. I walked over to the portrait. I looked at my mother's painted face. Her eyes followed me, filled with that eternal, self-righteous judgment. "Pure," she had said. I reached out and touched the gilded frame. "If you want to talk about purity, Mother," I whispered to the empty room, "then let's put it under the microscope. Let's see what this bloodline really looks like when we strip away the money and the lies." I turned away, grabbed the doorknob, and twisted it. The cold wind rushed in to meet me, biting and sharp. I stepped out into the night, the DNA kit heavy in my bag, ready to burn the whole world down with a single drop of saliva. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I was back in my Chicago apartment. The city was gray, locked under a ceiling of steel wool clouds, and the wind coming off the lake rattled the window frames. My husband, Jack, was in DOC for the week, leaving the apartment silent. It was a silence I usually filled with podcasts or music. But today, the only sound was the hum of my server tower and the frantic clicking of my mechanical keyboard. I had pushed the dining table against the wall and turned it into a war room. Stacks of file folders, printed bank statements, and sticky notes covered every square inch of the mahogany surface. In my professional life, I investigated corporate malfeasance. I tracked embezzlement, money laundering, and Ponzi schemes. I was used to looking at strangers' lives through the lens of a spreadsheet. But this file was different. I had labeled the digital folder simply price. I started with the basics. Rule number 1 of forensic auditing is to establish a timeline. You cannot see the anomaly if you do not know the baseline. I opened a fresh Excel sheet and began to plot the data points of the last 3 years. Column A, my pregnancy. Column B, the miscarriage. Column C, Caroline's pregnancy. Column D, the Price Foundation's financial activity. Column E, Redeemer Oaks Chapel's intake. I typed in the dates. The patterns emerged almost immediately, stark and undeniable against the white grid. 2 years ago, in late October, the Price Foundation, under the directorship of my mother, Veronica Price, approved a grant expansion. The stated purpose was community spiritual outreach. The primary beneficiary was Redeemer Oaks Chapel. I pulled up the foundation's Form 990, the public tax return filed by nonprofits. I scrolled down to the grant allocations. In the years prior, the church had received a standard donation of $5,000 annually. 2 years ago, that number jumped to $50,000. I highlighted the cell in red. A tenfold increase. I looked at the date of approval. It was signed November 12th. That was exactly 3 weeks after Caroline announced she was pregnant with Oliver. I dug deeper. I accessed the church's public annual report. Lucas Hale liked to brag about his fundraising skills online. There was a line item for anonymous donor, building fund. But then, there was another category, the Shepherd's Discretionary Fund. I cross-referenced the foundation's bank statements, which I could access because my father had listed me as a dormant signatory years ago. A detail Veronica had likely forgotten to scrub. I found a recurring monthly transfer of $2,500. It was labeled Hardship Assistance. I traced the recipient account. It was not a general church fund. It was a sub-account. I ran a quick search on the routing number. It belonged to a credit union in Madison, and the account holder was listed as a generic LLC called RO Ministries. I pulled the incorporation papers for the LLC. The registered agent was Lucas Hale. My mother was sending $2,500 a month directly to a fund controlled by the pastor, and she was signing the checks herself. I sat back, rubbing my temples. In the corporate world, we call this layering. You take legitimate money, move it through a charity, and funnel it to a private individual. But why? Was it blackmail? Or was it an allowance? My phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from Graham. Subject, files, body. I found the statements in the safe. I took photos. Please be careful. I opened the attachments. They were high-resolution photos of the joint American Express account Graham shared with Caroline. He had highlighted several charges in yellow. The Briarfield Inn, $140. October 4th. The Briarfield Inn, $140. October 11th. The Briarfield Inn, $140. October 18th. Briarfield was a sleepy town 40 minutes west of Willow Crest. It was close enough to drive to, but far enough that you would not run into your neighbor at the gas station. I went back to my timeline. I checked the dates against Caroline's social calendar, which she meticulously archived on Instagram. On October 4th, Caroline posted a photo of herself holding a Bible with the caption, "Visiting the Sacred Heart Orphanage with Pastor Luke. So blessed to serve the forgotten." I opened a new tab and searched for Sacred Heart Orphanage Briarfield events. Nothing. I called the orphanage. A tired-sounding woman answered. I used my standard pretext. I was an assistant checking on a donation. "I am just trying to confirm the volunteer hours for Mrs. Hart from last October," I said, keeping my voice bright and administrative. "Did the visitation group come on the 4th? "Honey," the woman said, "we have not had a visitation group on a Tuesday in 10 years. We do visitors on Saturdays only." "I see," I said, my hand tightening on the mouse. "Thank you." I hung up and dialed the Briarfield Inn. This required a different approach. I put on a frantic voice, the sound of a harried wife looking for a receipt. "Hi, this is so embarrassing," I said. "My husband stayed there a few times last fall, and he lost the folio for his expense report. I am trying to sort out our taxes. It would be under Smith? Or maybe he used his work name?" "We have a lot of Smiths," the clerk drawled. "He would have been there on Tuesday afternoons," I said. "He usually meets a spiritual consultant, a woman. He is a pastor. Where's the caller?" The clerk laughed, a harsh, knowing sound. "Oh, right, the pastor. Yeah, I remember him. Reverend Smith. Nice guy. Always asked for room 12 because it is in the back. He and his consultant were very regular." I hung up. The confirmation settled in my stomach like lead. It was a perfect ecosystem of deceit. Caroline was sleeping with Lucas Hale. Lucas was getting paid by the Price Foundation via my mother. My mother was subsidizing her daughter's affair to ensure the production of a pure grandchild, all while using the church as a moral shield. It was grotesque, but it was just fraud. It was dirty, but it was not deadly. I looked at the third stack of papers. These were the ones I had been avoiding. I had requested my own medical records from the hospital in Willow Crest immediately after returning to Chicago. HIPAA laws were the one thing Veronica could not bribe her way around. I opened the manila envelope. Inside were the clinical notes from my pregnancy 2 years ago. I scanned the blood work. I scanned the ultrasound reports. Everything looked normal for the first 8 weeks. Then I reached the prescription log. Patient prescribed prenatal plus compound, 1 tablet daily. I frowned. I remembered the bottle. It didn't look like a pharmacy bottle. It was a white tub with a gold label. Dispensed directly from Dr. Aris's office. It is better than the store-bought stuff. Mother had insisted. I asked Dr. Aris specially. He says you need the extra support. I looked at the ingredient list in the medical file. It was a proprietary blend. Iron, folic acid, calcium, and then, near the bottom, phytomenadione, high dose. I froze. Phytomenadione is vitamin K. It helps blood clot. I have factor V Leiden. It is a genetic clotting disorder. It is mild, usually manageable, but it means my blood is prone to thickening. When I am not pregnant, it is fine, but pregnancy naturally increases clotting factors. Any competent doctor knows that you do not give high-dose vitamin K to a pregnant woman with a history of clotting. You give them blood thinners, you give them heparin. You do the exact opposite of what Dr. Aris did. I typed the drug interaction into my forensic database. Warning: high doses of vitamin K in patients with thrombophilia can lead to placental thrombosis, fetal growth restriction, and spontaneous abortion. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt sideways. It was not an accident. Dr. Aris had been our family doctor for 30 years. He knew my medical history better than I did. He had diagnosed my clotting issue when I was 20. He knew, and he prescribed it anyway. I closed my eyes, and the memory played back in high definition. I was sitting in the kitchen. I had my own bottle of vitamins on the counter. Veronica had walked in. She picked up my bottle and made a face. "Trash," she had said. "These are garbage. Maddie, here." She had pulled the white tub with the gold label out of her purse. "I spoke to Dr. Aris this morning. He prepared these for you. He said if you want this baby to stick, you need to take these. Trust me, I am your mother." I had trusted her. I had taken the pill. And 3 weeks later, my body did exactly what the chemistry forced it to do. My blood thickened, the placenta clogged, the life inside me suffocated. I opened my eyes. I was shaking, not a little tremble, but a violent, full-body shudder. This was not just about money. It was not just about an affair. My mother had not just thanked me for a miscarriage. She had engineered it. She had looked at me, her own daughter, and decided that my child was a genetic liability, and she had used her checkbook and her pet doctor to remove the problem. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. The numbers blurred. "Thanks to your miscarriage, the family line remains pure." It was not a cruel comment. It was a mission statement. I reached for my phone. I needed to call Jack. I needed to call the police, but my thumb hovered over the screen. If I called the police now, Dr. Aris would claim it was a medical error. Veronica would claim ignorance. They would bury me in litigation until the statute of limitations ran out. No, I was not going to give them the chance to lawyer up. I looked at the timeline again. The Price Foundation's annual Thanksgiving Gala was coming up. It was the biggest event of the year. The entire town would be there, the board members, the donors, the church elders. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was cold. I did not want justice in a courtroom. I wanted a forensic dismantling. I wanted to present the findings of my audit to the shareholders. I picked up a red pen and circled the date of the gala on my calendar. "Okay, Mother," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to talk about what is in the blood? Let's show them exactly what is in yours." I turned back to the computer. I had the what and the how. Now, I needed the who. I needed to break Dr. Aris. And to do that, I needed to find the money trail that led to him. I began to type. The sound of the keys was like gunshots in the quiet apartment. The audit was over. The prosecution was about to begin. The knock on my door was not the polite, rhythmic rap of a neighbor. It was a frantic, irregular pounding, like someone trying to wake the dead. I checked the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the face on the other side, but I knew the beige trench coat. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Caroline stood in the hallway. My sister, the woman who treated her appearance like a religion, looked like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Her hair, usually sprayed into submission, was plastered to her forehead in damp strands. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, and devoid of mascara. She was not wearing her signature pearls. For the first time in her life, she looked like a mess. She did not say hello. She pushed past me into the apartment, bringing the smell of cold wind and expensive perfume that had turned stale. "Lucas called me," she said, her voice shaking. "He said someone is digging into the church books. He said someone is asking questions about the discretionary fund, about him." She spun around to face me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Only you could do that, Maddie. Only you know how to strip a ledger until it bleeds." I closed the door calmly and locked it. I did not feel the need to yell. The anger I had felt in the car 3 days ago had crystallized into something colder and harder. "Hello to you too. Caroline," I said. "Do you want some water? You look dehydrated." "Stop it," she snapped. "Stop acting like you are above this. Are you trying to ruin him? Are you trying to ruin me?" I walked past her to the dining table. My war room was still set up, though I had tidied the stacks of paper into neat piles. I picked up a specific folder, the one labeled Briarfield, and held it out to her. "I am not trying to ruin anyone," I said. "I am just balancing the books. Take it." Caroline stared at the folder like it was a loaded gun. She did not move. "Take it," I repeated, my voice sharpening. She snatched it from my hand and ripped it open. Photos of credit card statements slid out. Printed screenshots of the Briarfield Inn's reservation logs fluttered to the floor. She stared at the highlighted dates. "October 4th, I recited, leaning against the edge of the table. "October 11th, October 18th. You told Graham you were counseling orphans. The orphanage says they have not had a Tuesday visitor in a decade. The hotel clerk, however, remembers a very devout couple in room 12. Caroline dropped the folder. She looked up at me, and her face crumbled. It was not the pretty single-tear crying she did at funerals. It was ugly, desperate sobbing. "It is not what you think," she choked out. I was drowning. Maddie, after Oliver was born, I felt like I was disappearing. Graham is always working. Mother is always criticizing. I felt like a vessel that had served its purpose and was just being kept on the shelf." She paced the small living room, wringing her hands. "Lucas listened to me. He didn't look at me like I was a price. He looked at me like I was a person. It started as counseling, spiritual guidance, I swear to God. Maddie, it was just talking at first." "Talking," I said flatly, "in a motel room 40 miles away?" "We were weak," she cried. "It happened. Maybe once or twice. We were both in a bad place. We prayed for forgiveness immediately after. We ended it months ago." "You ended it?" I asked. "Then why did the payments from the foundation to his personal LLC continue until last week?" Caroline froze. She blinked, looking genuinely confused. "What payments?" "Mother has been paying him," I said. $2,500 a month? Hush money? Or an allowance for keeping her daughter happy?" Caroline's mouth opened and closed. Mother knows?" "Mother knows everything," I said. "She probably orchestrated the whole thing to keep the scandal quiet. That is what she does. She manages assets." I took a step closer to her. I needed to ask the question, the one that had been keeping me awake for 3 nights. "Caroline," I said softly. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Is Oliver his?" The room went silent. The radiator hissed in the corner. The traffic noise from the street below seemed to vanish. Caroline did not scream. She did not deny it. She just stopped breathing for a solid 10 seconds. She looked at the floor. She looked at the wall. She looked anywhere but at me. "He is my son," she whispered finally. "He is my baby." "That is not what I asked," I said. "Is he Graham's son?" Her silence stretched out, thin and taut as a wire. It was a confession louder than any scream. She began to cry again, softer this time, a defeated, whimpering sound. "Graham is a good father," she sobbed. "He loves him. Why does biology matter? Why do you have to destroy everything just because you are bitter about what happened to you?" "Bitter?" I laughed, a harsh sound that startled both of us. "You think I am doing this because I am jealous? Caroline, our mother drugged me. She purposely terminated my pregnancy to keep the line pure, and now I find out the pure grandson she worships is the product of an affair with a pastor. Do you not see the irony? Do you not see how sick this is?" Caroline looked up, her face pale. "Drugged you? What are you talking about? That was an accident. Mother said it was God's will." "Mother and Dr. Aris," I started to say, ready to lay out the evidence of the vitamin K. But my phone rang. It was a sharp, jarring trill that cut through the thick atmosphere of the room. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. Area code, Willow Crest. I picked it up. Hello? Is this Madeline Price? A woman's voice, urgent, professional, but strained. Yes. This is Nurse Hayes from Willow Crest Memorial. You are listed as an emergency contact for Veronica Price. My stomach dropped. I looked at Caroline, who was watching me with terrified eyes. What happened? I asked. Your mother was brought in 20 minutes ago, the nurse said. Suspected stroke. She collapsed at her office at the foundation. She is stable for the moment, but she is unconscious. We are preparing her for imaging. I am in Chicago, I said, my mind racing. Is my sister there? She is with me. You should both come, the nurse said. And Ms. Price? There is something else. When the paramedics arrived, your mother was clutching a packet of papers. She was apparently reading them when she collapsed. The police took them into evidence, but the EMT mentioned, well, it seems to be a copy of your grandfather's will. I gripped the phone tighter. Just the will? And some medical records, the nurse added, her voice dropping lower. Yours, I believe, from 2 years ago. The EMT said she was extremely agitated. She was screaming about a betrayal before she went down. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Thank you, I said. We are on our way. I hung up. I looked at Caroline. Mother had a stroke, I said. She is at the hospital. Caroline let out a strangled gasp and grabbed her purse. Oh my God, we have to go. Caroline, wait, I said, grabbing her arm. They found an envelope on her desk. It had grandfather's will and my medical records in it. Caroline pulled away, her eyes wild. So? You sent them. You wanted to blow everything up. And you did. You almost killed her. I didn't send them, I said, my voice steady. I have the originals right here. I haven't mailed anything yet. Caroline stopped. She looked at the stack of papers on my table, then back at me. Then who did? I don't know, I said. But someone else is watching. Someone else knows. I don't care, Caroline screamed. She is dying. We have to go. We took my car. Caroline was in no state to drive. The trip back to Willow Crest usually took 3 hours. I did it in 2.5. The silence in the car was heavy, suffocating. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark cornfields rushing by. She was chewing on her thumbnail, a habit she had not had since she was 12. If she dies, Caroline whispered, this ends, right? We don't have to tell Graham. We don't have to ruin Oliver's life. We can just bury it. I kept my eyes on the road. The headlights cut through the darkness. It doesn't work like that, I said. The truth is like water. Caroline, it always finds a crack. He is 7 years old. Maddie. She turned to me, her voice pleading. If this comes out, he loses his father. He loses his reputation. He becomes the town bastard. Is that what you want? Are you going to punish a child to get back at Mom? Don't you dare, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare use that boy as a human shield. You didn't think about his reputation when you were meeting Lucas. You didn't think about his future when you let Mother pay off your lover. You created this mess. Don't put the cleanup on my conscience. I was protecting him, she insisted. I wanted him to have a family. You wanted a picture-perfect life, I corrected her. And you didn't care who you had to erase to get it. She slumped back in her seat, sobbing quietly. I gripped the steering wheel. My mind was racing. Who sent the envelope? Graham? No. He didn't have access to my medical records. Dr. Aris? Unlikely. He would be incriminating himself. There was a third player on the board, someone who hated Veronica Price as much as I did, or someone who wanted the foundation to crumble. We passed the sign, Welcome to Willow Crest, founded on tradition. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. We pulled into the hospital parking lot. The red neon sign of the emergency room buzzed against the night sky. I killed the engine. Caroline opened her door immediately, running toward the entrance without waiting for me. She was desperate to play the role of the grieving daughter, to fall to her knees and pray, to cover the cracks with tears. I sat in the car for a moment longer. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me was tired. Her skin was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but the uncertainty that used to live in her expression was gone. I was not the fragile Maddie anymore. I was not the nobody who could be silenced with a pitying look and a lecture about God's will. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my bag, the one containing the file with the vitamin K research and the bank statements. Mother had collapsed because someone showed her a mirror. She had seen the reflection of her own sins, and her body had shut down. I stepped out of the car. The cold air bit at my cheeks. I walked toward the sliding glass doors of the ER. I was not going in there to hold her hand. I was not going in there to forgive her. I was going in there to see if she was strong enough to stand trial, because whether she lived or died, the audit was not finished. The ledger still had to be balanced. The waiting room of the intensive care unit was a study in sterile purgatory. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, and the air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. My husband, Jack, stood beside me, his hand resting on the small of my back. He had flown in from Washington, D.C., the moment I called, still wearing his court suit, looking like a lifeline in a room full of drowning people. I leaned into his touch, grateful for the solid, silent warmth of him. I felt like I was standing on a fault line, waiting for the earth to crack open. Graham sat on one of the vinyl chairs, his elbows on his knees, staring at a white envelope in his hands. He had not moved for 20 minutes. Caroline was pacing. She looked frantic, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She tried to approach Graham, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his shoulder. "Graham, honey," she whispered, her voice thin. "Please, talk to me. We can fix this." Graham flinched. He pulled his shoulder away as if her touch were a physical burn. He did not look up. "Do not touch me," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. He stood up then. The movement was slow, deliberate. He looked around the room, at Caroline, at Jack, and finally at me. "I waited," Graham said. "I wanted everyone here, because whatever is in this envelope, it belongs to this family, for better or worse." He ripped the tab on the envelope. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Caroline let out a small, strangled whimper. She covered her mouth with her hand. Graham pulled out the paper. He unfolded it. He read it once. Then he read it again. His face did not change. He looked like a man who had already accepted his own execution and was just reading the warrant to check for spelling errors. 0%, Graham read aloud. "Probability of paternity, 0%. He looked at Caroline. "He is not mine." Caroline sobbed, her knees buckling. She slumped into the chair behind her, burying her face in her hands. "Graham, please, it was a mistake." "Read the rest," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "The lab ran the cross-reference I requested, didn't they?" Graham nodded. He looked at the second page. "The sample shows a 99.9% familial match with a donor profile in the regional database." Graham read, "The donor is listed as Lucas Hale." The name hung in the air. Graham dropped the paper on the floor. It fluttered down, landing near Caroline's expensive Italian leather boots. "He donates blood every quarter," Graham said, his voice hollow. "He put it in the church newsletter. He bragged about his civic duty. I guess he never thought his charity would come back to haunt him." Caroline looked up, her face streaked with tears and snot. She looked pathetic, but underneath the misery, there was a desperate, defensive spark. "You don't understand," she cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You don't know what it is like. Mother was relentless. She called me every day. She asked if I was pregnant yet. She told me the price line was dying out. She told me I was failing the family. I needed a baby. Graham, I needed him to be perfect. And we were having trouble, and Lucas was there. And he said it was God's way of helping. Graham stared at her. You slept with a pastor to secure an inheritance, and you are calling it God's will? I did it for us, Caroline screamed. I did it so we could keep the house, so we could keep the status. Mother would have cut us off if I didn't give her an heir. That is enough, Jack said, stepping forward. His lawyer voice was calm but authoritative. Caroline, stop talking. Before Caroline could respond, the double doors to the ICU swung open. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped out. He looked tired. Family of Veronica Price? He asked. We all turned. The domestic war was paused, suspended in amber. She is stable, the doctor said. It was a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, brought on by extreme acute stress. Her blood pressure is still dangerously high, but she is awake. He looked at his clipboard. She is asking for her daughters. Specifically, she said she wants to see Madeline and Caroline, alone. Graham sat back down, looking at the wall. Go, he said. I have nothing to say to her. I looked at Caroline. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself, trying to pull the mask of the dutiful daughter back into place. It was a reflex, ingrained in her since birth. Come on, I said. Let's go see what she wants. We walked down the corridor. The rhythmic beeping of monitors grew louder. Room 304. Veronica Price lay in the hospital bed. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The wires and tubes seemed to tether her to the earth, preventing her from floating away on a cloud of her own self-importance. But her eyes were open, and they were not the eyes of a sick woman. They were the eyes of a cornered animal. She watched us enter. She waited until the door clicked shut. Who sent it? She rasped. Her voice was weak, but the venom was intact. Caroline rushed to the bedside, grabbing Veronica's hand. Mom, oh my God, are you okay? We were so worried. Veronica pulled her hand away. Stop it. Caroline, I asked a question. Which one of you sent the envelope to my office? Was it you? She looked at me. Or was it you? You ungrateful little... It wasn't me, I said calmly, standing at the foot of the bed. And it wasn't Caroline. We didn't send it, Mother. But I know what was in it. Veronica's eyes darted between us. She saw the lack of guilt. She saw the confusion on Caroline's face and the cold resolve on mine. If you didn't send it, she whispered, then who? Does it matter? I interrupted. The police have it now, but I want to talk about the medical records. Mother, the ones from 2 years ago, the ones that show Dr. Eris prescribed me a clotting agent when I had a clotting disorder. Veronica's face went gray. She looked at the monitor, watching her own heart rate climb. It was a mistake, she wheezed. Dr. Eris is old. He made a mistake. No, I said. He didn't, and neither did you. You thanked me for it, remember? You said the line remained pure. I leaned over the rail of the bed. Veronica closed her eyes. Her breathing was ragged. Because of the will, she muttered. The room went silent. What? Caroline asked. What will? Grandfather's will? Your father. My father. Veronica opened her eyes, and they were filled with a lifetime of resentment. He was a fool, a sentimental old fool. She looked at me. You think you are so smart. Madeline, you think you are a Price, but you are not. I frowned. What are you talking about? You are not my daughter. Veronica spat the words out. Not biologically. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I grabbed the bed rail to steady myself. Excuse me? My sister, Veronica said. Lydia, the one we never talk about, the one who ran away to California with a musician. She got pregnant. She came back here, sick, dying of cancer. She died giving birth to you. I stared at her, my entire life. The feeling of not belonging, the coldness, the constant comparison, suddenly shifted into focus. Father, he felt guilty, Veronica continued, her voice gaining strength from the bitterness. He blamed himself for Lydia leaving, so he made me take you. He made us adopt you and raise you as our own. He wanted to hide the scandal. He wanted to pretend Lydia never fell. So I am your niece, I said slowly. You are a cuckoo bird in my nest, Veronica hissed. But that wasn't enough for him. In his will, he put in a clause, a dormant clause. He said that because Lydia never got her share of the estate, it would pass to her line. She looked at Caroline, then back at me. The clause states that upon the birth of your firstborn child, Lydia's first grandchild, the controlling interest of the Price Foundation and the family trust transfers from me to you. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I could hear Caroline's sharp intake of breath. He wanted to make sure Lydia's bloodline wasn't cut out, Veronica whispered. He thought I would treat you badly. He wanted to give you a weapon. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It was not about purity. It was not about blue eyes or straight noses. It was about $300 million. If my baby had been born 2 years ago, Veronica would have lost control of the foundation. Caroline would have lost her status as the heir apparent. The entire power structure of the family would have shifted to me. So you killed it, I said. My voice was a whisper, but it filled the room. You didn't just want a pure line. You wanted to keep your crown. I protected this family, Veronica shouted, her voice cracking. The monitor started to beep faster. You don't know how to run a legacy. You are a bean counter. You would have ruined everything. I did what I had to do to save us. Caroline stepped back from the bed, looking at her mother with horror. Mom, did you know? Did you know about the clause when Maddie was pregnant? Veronica looked at Caroline. I did it for you, too. Caroline, if she had that baby, you would have been nothing, penniless. I saved your inheritance. You killed my child, I said. I was not shouting. I was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. I looked at the woman who I had called mother for 34 years, the woman who had raised me, not out of love, but out of obligation to a dead patriarch, the woman who had murdered my unborn son to protect a bank account. You are not a matriarch, I said. You are a murderer. It was a clump of cells, Veronica shrieked, struggling to sit up. It was a business decision. And this, I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my phone, is a forensic audit. I held up the phone. The screen was black, but the red light at the top was pulsing. I have been recording since I walked into this room. I lied. I wasn't recording, but Veronica didn't know that. In her state, panic was more powerful than fact. Veronica's eyes widened. She gasped, her hand clutching her chest. The monitor began to alarm, high-pitched, urgent. Nurses rushed into the room. You need to leave, one of them ordered, pushing past me to get to the patient. I stepped back. I watched them swarm over Veronica. I watched Caroline standing in the corner, sobbing, looking like a child who had just realized the monster under the bed was actually the person tucking her in. I turned and walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, back toward the waiting room. I was adopted. My child would have been the heir. My mother had poisoned me to stop it. The puzzle was complete. The ledger was balanced. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to claim what was mine. Not the money, not the house. I was going to claim the justice that my grandfather had tried to bury in a legal clause 30 years ago. I pushed open the doors to the waiting room. Jack looked up. Graham looked up. Is she okay? Jack asked. She will live, I said. For now. I looked at Graham. We have the DNA, I said. We have the medical records. And now we have the motive. What motive? Graham asked. Greed, I said. Pure, unadulterated greed. I picked up my coat. We are leaving, I said to Jack. We have a party to prepare for. What party? Caroline asked from the doorway, looking broken and small. The Thanksgiving gala? I said. Mother wants to protect the family name? Fine. We will give the town a show they will never forget. We left the hospital with the envelope that had triggered my mother's collapse burning a hole in my bag. The night air was biting, stripping away the antiseptic smell of the ICU, but the cold could not touch the heat of the anger radiating from my chest. We drove to Graham's house. It was a temporary sanctuary, a place where the walls did not whisper Price family secrets. Inside, the house was quiet. Graham had gone upstairs to check on Oliver. Jack and I sat at the kitchen island. The contents of the envelope spread out on the granite countertop like autopsy photos. Jack was in his element. He was no longer the supportive husband. He was the corporate attorney. He read through the copy of my grandfather's will, his finger tracing the lines of legal jargon that had dictated the course of my life before I was even born. "It is valid," Jack said finally, looking up. "Clause 14b, it is a conditional bequest. In the event that my adopted granddaughter, Madeline, produces a biological heir, the voting majority of the Price Foundation Trust shall transfer immediately to her line, to be held in trust until said heir reaches the age of 21. He shook his head, looking at the paper with a mix of professional admiration and personal disgust. "Your grandfather knew, Veronica," Jack said. "He knew she would try to freeze you out. This was his way of forcing her hand. He made your womb the key to the vault." I stared at the document. It was not a will. It was a bounty. "So she did not just hate me," I said, my voice flat. "She feared me. Every time she looked at me, she saw an expiration date on her power." "And when you got pregnant," Jack said softly, the clock started ticking. I turned away from the will and opened my laptop. The emotion I felt was too large to process. So I did what I always did. I compressed it. I turned it into data. "If she did this for the trust," I said, booting up my forensic software, "then it was a premeditated act, and premeditated acts leave paper trails." I logged into the proprietary database my firm subscribed to. It was a repository of leaked data from major breaches, credit card numbers, passwords, emails. It was the dark underbelly of the internet, indexed and searchable for fraud investigations. Last year, a massive ransomware attack had hit a network of private healthcare providers in Wisconsin. Willow Crest Medical Group, Dr. Aris's practice, was on the victim list. I typed in the search parameters: Aris, Price, Veronica. The system churned for a moment, the loading bar spinning. Then, a list populated. There were hundreds of emails, appointment reminders, holiday greetings, invoices, but I filtered by date, narrowing it down to the month of my pregnancy 2 years ago. I found it, an email sent from Dr. Aris's personal account to my mother's private email address. Subject: regarding the adjustments. I clicked it open. "Veronica, I have switched the prescription as we discussed. The compound will support the narrative of a high-risk term, but we must be careful. The dosage of the K agent is aggressive given her history. If we proceed, the outcome is almost certainly going to be a termination of the pregnancy within 3 weeks. Are you certain you want to take this route? There are other ways to handle the estate issues." And underneath, my mother's reply, sent 4 minutes later: "Do it. If she carries to term, we lose everything. Better a small tragedy now than a total collapse later. Tell her it is for her health. She believes anything you say." I sat back. The air left my lungs. It was not just implied. It was written. The K agent, vitamin K, the clotting factor. They had discussed it like they were deciding whether to prune a rosebush or cut it down entirely. "Maddie?" Jack asked, seeing my face. I turned the laptop so he could see. Jack read the email. His jaw tightened until I saw a muscle jump in his cheek. "Jesus," he whispered. "This is conspiracy to commit assault, maybe manslaughter." "It is a white-collar crime," I corrected him, my voice devoid of tremor. "She managed a risk. I was the liability. My baby was the cost of doing business." I did not stop there. I went into the digital archives of the Price Foundation. I still had my legacy login credentials from when I audited their books as an intern 10 years ago. Veronica never changed passwords. She thought security was for people who had things to hide. not for people who owned the town. I searched the old scanned files from the year of the pregnancy. I was looking for financial motivations, but I found something more personal. It was a scanned image of a handwritten note, scribbled on the back of a meeting agenda. It was my mother's handwriting, looping, sharp, aristocratic. The girl refuses to understand that she does not belong to this root, but father's law has a loophole. As long as that child does not breathe, the trust holds. I will not let a bastard line steal what I built. I saved the image. "We have them," Jack said. "Maddie, we can go to the police right now. This is enough for a warrant." I looked at the screen. If we go to the police, Dr. Eris will claim his email was hacked or forged. Veronica will hire a team of defense attorneys who will drag this out for 5 years. They will exhume my medical history. They will put my miscarriage on trial. They will say I was stressed, I was weak, I was negligent. I closed the laptop. I do not want a settlement, Jack, and I do not want a quiet plea deal. Then what do you want? I want to burn it down, I said. I want every person in this town who looked at me with pity to know exactly who Veronica Price is. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Sterling, a board member of the foundation. He was a retired banker, decent but spineless. "Maddie, I just received a disturbing package at my home. It contains copies of a will and some medical files. Mrs. Vance got one too. We are convening an emergency meeting. What is going on?" The unknown sender, the whistleblower, was escalating. They were forcing a confrontation. I picked up the phone and dialed Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," I said when he answered, "do not call a meeting yet, not until you hear what I have to say." "Maddie, these allegations," Sterling stammered. "If this is true, the foundation is compromised. We have a fiduciary duty." "You have a duty to the truth." I cut him off. "I am going to send you a file. It contains financial records regarding unauthorized payments to a certain pastor, and a timeline of my mother's medical interference. I am not asking you to fire her tonight. I am asking you to let the Thanksgiving gala proceed." "The gala?" Sterling sounded horrified. "We should cancel it. We cannot host a party in the middle of a scandal." "If you cancel it, she wins," I said. "She spins the narrative. She claims she is sick. She claims she is a victim of slander. No, let the gala happen. Let her stand on that stage, and then let me speak." There was a long silence on the line. "You are asking us to facilitate a public execution," Sterling said. "I am asking you to conduct a public audit," I replied. "You can stand with her and sink, Mr. Sterling, or you can stand with the truth and save the foundation. It is your choice." He sighed. "I will talk to Mrs. Vance. If the evidence is as strong as you say, we will not stop you." I hung up. Jack was watching me. "You are playing a dangerous game. Maddie, if this goes wrong, she could sue you for defamation. She could destroy your career." "My career is finding the rot," I said. "I am just doing my job." I stood up and walked into the living room. Graham was sitting in the armchair, a book open in his lap. Oliver was asleep on the sofa, covered by a knitted blanket. The little boy looked peaceful. He had Caroline's chin, but looking closely now, I could see the shape of Lucas Hale's eyes. He was innocent. He was a pawn in a game he did not know he was playing. Graham looked up. He looked exhausted. "Is he okay?" I asked, nodding at Oliver. "He asked where Mommy was," Graham whispered. "I told him she was helping Grandma. I didn't have the heart to tell him his grandmother is the reason his life is about to fall apart." I sat on the edge of the coffee table. "Graham, I need you to do something for me. For the gala." "I am not going," Graham said, shaking his head. "I am taking Oliver and I am leaving." "You can't leave yet," I said. "If you run, you look guilty. You look like you're hiding something. You need to be there. You need to be the one who stands up for Oliver." "Stand up how?" "By telling the truth," I said. "About the paternity, about the pressure. If you do it, you take the power away from Veronica. You show the town that you are a father first, and a Price by marriage second." Graham looked at his sleeping son. He reached out and brushed a lock of hair from Oliver's forehead. "She called him pure," Graham said, his voice cracking. "She knew he wasn't mine, and she still called him pure because he was part of her plan." "Exactly," I said. "Help me break the plan. Graham?" He nodded slowly. "Okay, I will do it." I went back to the kitchen. Jack was packing the documents into his briefcase. "You realize," Jack said, "that after this, there is no going back. You will be the woman who destroyed her own family." "They destroyed themselves, Jack," I said. "I am just writing the report." I looked out the window. The snow had stopped falling, but the drifts were deep. The town of Willow Crest lay silent under the white blanket. It looked pristine. It looked pure. But I knew what was underneath. I had the emails. I had the bank statements. I had the will. The investigation was complete. The evidence was compiled. Now, all that was left was the closing argument, and I was going to deliver it while my mother carved the turkey. The preparations for the Price Foundation annual Thanksgiving Gala usually took 6 months. My mother, however, believed she could manage the entire event from a hospital bed in 3 days. She had discharged herself against medical advice 48 hours after the collapse. Her doctors had protested, citing her blood pressure and the risk of a secondary stroke. But Veronica Price did not listen to doctors unless they were on her payroll. She claimed it was about honor. She claimed the town needed to see that the Price legacy was unshakable. I knew the truth. She was terrified. She knew the walls were closing in, and her instinct was to put on her most expensive dress and stand in the spotlight, daring anyone to touch her. It was the perfect setup for what I had planned. I sat in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of the foundation, facing Mr. Sterling and Mrs. Vance. They were the 2 board members who had received the anonymous packages. They looked nervous, wringing their hands like guilty schoolchildren. "She insists on presiding over the turkey carving," Sterling said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Maddie, is this wise? She is frail, and with these allegations hanging over her." "Let her do it," I said. My voice was calm, the voice of a consultant proposing a restructuring plan. "If you bar her from the stage, she becomes a martyr. The town will whisper that the board pushed out a sick old woman. You do not want that PR nightmare." "Mrs. Vance nodded slowly. "So, what do you suggest?" "Let her speak," I said. "Let her play the role of the benevolent matriarch one last time. We will frame it as a tribute to her years of service, a transition event." "And the allegations?" Sterling asked, lowering his voice. "I will handle them," I said. "I have prepared a speech regarding financial transparency. It is time the foundation pivoted toward a more modern, open model. I will present the data tonight. If the data clears her, then we move on. If it does not—" I let the sentence hang. They exchanged a look. They were relieved to have the responsibility taken off their shoulders. They agreed. The trap was set. I spent the next 24 hours orchestrating the logistics with the precision of a bank heist. I was not just planning a dinner. I was planning a 3-stage demolition. I called it the 3 waves. Wave 1 was financial. I had compiled the bank records linking the foundation's hardship fund to Lucas Hale's private LLC. I had the hotel receipts. I had the timeline. This would strip away the moral high ground. Wave 2 was biological. I had the DNA results. Graham had agreed to present them. This would destroy the social standing, the myth of the perfect family that Veronica used as currency. Wave 3 was criminal. The will, the emails from Dr. Eris, the proof that she had traded my unborn child for control of the trust. This was the nuclear option. This would not just ruin her reputation, it would end her freedom. I needed the stage to be perfect. On the morning of the gala, I walked into the grand ballroom of the Willow Crest Country Club. The staff was setting up. Gold tablecloths, silver centerpieces. It was nauseatingly opulent. I found the event coordinator, a harried woman named Sarah. "The head table," I said, pointing to the long dais at the front of the room. "We need to change the seating arrangement." "But Mrs. Price sent over the chart," Sarah began. Mrs. Price is recovering from a stroke, I interrupted smoothly. I am handling the details to reduce her stress. We are going to replicate the family dynamic. It makes for better photos. I took the place cards. I placed Veronica at the center. To her right, I placed Caroline. To Caroline's right, Graham. And then, I took my own card. Usually, I was seated at the far end, near the treasurer. I walked to the spot directly opposite Veronica. I placed my card there. I wanted her to look at me. When the walls came down, I wanted to be the last thing she saw. "What about the boy?" Sarah asked. "Oliver?" "Oliver is not attending," I said. This was the one non-negotiable condition I had set with Graham. I had hired a private security firm to watch Graham's house where Oliver was staying with his nanny. No phones, no live streams. That little boy would be eating pizza and watching cartoons while we dismantled his world. He would not be collateral damage. By noon, the atmosphere in town was electric with gossip. I had leaked a select portion of the financial audit to the Board of Elders at Redeemer Oaks Chapel. They had acted faster than I expected. Lucas Hale had been suspended pending an investigation. I knew Lucas. He was a narcissist. He wouldn't stay home and hide. He would come to the gala. He would try to charm his way out of it, try to corner board members and spin a story about persecution. He would walk right into the line of fire. At 2 p.m, I went to the hospital to pick up my mother's personal items to bring to the venue. She was sitting in the chair by the window, dressed in a silk robe, applying lipstick with a trembling hand. "Here is the draft of my speech," I said, handing her a single sheet of paper. She took it, her eyes scanning the text suspiciously. "Tonight, we celebrate the legacy of giving, importance of transparency, looking toward the future." It was a masterpiece of corporate fluff, meaningless buzzwords. "Transparency?" she scoffed. "Sounds boring, but fine, as long as you keep it short. I do not want you boring the donors." "I promise," I said. "It will be memorable." She handed the paper back to me. "You are finally making yourself useful. Madeline, maybe there is hope for you yet." The irony was so sharp I almost tasted blood. I left the room and met Jack in the parking lot. He was on the phone, pacing. "Understood," Jack was saying. "We will have the packet ready for you at 9 o'clock. Yes, the chain of custody is intact." He hung up and looked at me. "That was District Attorney Miller. He is interested. He prosecuted the United Way fraud case 3 years ago. He hates charity scammers. He said if we can show a direct link between the foundation's funds and personal expenses, he will open a formal inquiry tonight." "We can show more than that," I said. "Are you sure, Maddie?" Jack asked. He reached out and took my hand. "Once we start this, the town is going to turn on us too. We will be the ones who killed Santa Claus. Willow Crest relies on the Price Foundation for the library, the park, the scholarships. If we sink it, we hurt innocent people. The foundation has an endowment of $300 million, I said. It will survive Veronica. It just needs to be cut out of the cancer." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from a blocked number. "If you continue, not only will your mother fall, the whole town will lose faith. Can you handle that?" I stared at the screen. The anonymous whistleblower. The person who had sent the will to Veronica. They were watching. They knew exactly what I was planning. It was a warning, or maybe a test. I typed a reply, though I knew it probably wouldn't go through. Let it fall. I deleted the thread. "Maddie?" Jack pressed. "I am sure," I said. "If a town only stands tall because it is propped up by lies, then it deserves to collapse." I looked at the time. 4 hours until the doors opened. I went back to the hotel to change. I did not wear the charcoal blouse this time. I put on a dress. It was black, severe, and cut like armor. I pulled my hair back tight. I looked in the mirror. I did not see the scared woman who had sat at that dining table a week ago. I saw the auditor. I was going to audit my mother. I was going to audit my sister. I was going to audit the entire corrupt institution of my family. And I was going to do it with a smile on my face. I picked up my clutch. Inside was the flash drive with the presentation. Inside was the DNA report. Inside was the copy of the email from Dr. Eris. The heist was on. The players were in position. I walked out of the room, ready to serve the cold dish of revenge. The ballroom of the Willow Crest Country Club had been transformed into a temple of gold and white. It was aggressive opulence. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white lilies and gilded branches. The tablecloths were heavy silk that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled of roast turkey, expensive perfume, and the specific, musty scent of old money. I stood near the podium, watching the elite of our town file in. There were the donors, men in tuxedos who wrote checks to assuage their guilt. There were the church elders, looking solemn and pious, and there was Lucas Hale, standing near the bar, looking nervous but defiant, wearing a velvet blazer that was a little too trendy for the occasion. Then, the doors opened wide, and the room broke into applause. Veronica Price entered. She was leaning heavily on a silver-handled cane, her face pale beneath layers of foundation, but her chin was tilted up at that familiar, imperious angle. She wore a gold gown that matched the decor, looking like the statue of a saint brought to life. Caroline walked beside her, clutching her arm, smiling that frozen, pageant queen smile. Graham walked a few paces behind them, his face unreadable. My mother worked the room as she made her way to the stage. She nodded to the mayor. She patted the hand of the bank president. She did not look at me. To her, I was just part of the stage management, a prop to be arranged and then ignored. The head table was set up on the dais, elevated 2 feet above the rest of the room. It was a replica of our dining room table, right down to the silver candelabras. Veronica took her seat at the head. Caroline sat to her right. Graham sat next to Caroline. And I walked up the steps and took the seat directly opposite my mother. She flicked her eyes toward me, a micro-expression of annoyance, but she did not break character. She smoothed her napkin over her lap and smiled at the crowd. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with a voice like melted butter, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "tonight is a night of resilience. Despite her recent health scare, she insisted on being here to uphold our town's finest tradition. Please welcome the heart of the Price Foundation, Mrs. Veronica Price, for the ceremonial carving of the turkey." The applause was polite, respectful. A waiter placed a massive golden-brown turkey in front of my mother. She stood up, gripping the table for support, and picked up the carving knife. The light caught the blade. It was the exact same visual from a week ago. The knife, the smile, the turkey. "Thank you," Veronica said, her voice projected by the lapel mic. "Tradition is the glue that holds us together. We must protect what is ours. We must prune the branches to save the tree." She raised the knife. "Mother," I said. My voice was not loud, but I had leaned into my own table microphone. The sound boomed through the speakers, cutting through the ambient noise of the room. Veronica froze. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Not now, Madeline." "I think now is the perfect time," I said, standing up. "You were just talking about pruning, about protecting the line. I thought I might share a few words about gratitude and transparency." The room went quiet. People sensed the tension. It was not the warm, fuzzy tension of a toast. It was the static charge before lightning strikes. Veronica's knuckles turned white on the knife handle. "This is not the time for your speeches." "It will be short," I said. I looked out at the audience. I made eye contact with Mr. Sterling in the front row. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "A week ago," I began, my voice conversational, "we sat at a table just like this one, and my mother said something to me that I have been thinking about ever since." She looked at me while carving the turkey, and she said, "Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was audible. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The silence that followed was heavy, shocked. Veronica flinched, She laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, Madeline, don't be dramatic. It was a joke." "Was it?" I asked. "Let's look at the data." I pressed a button on the remote in my hand. The large projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the foundation's logo, flickered and changed. It showed a spreadsheet. "This is a ledger of the Price Foundation's discretionary spending over the last 2 years," I said. "Specifically, the Hardship Fund. You will notice a recurring monthly payment of $2,500 to an entity called RMO Ministries." I pointed to the screen. "And here are the dates of those transfers. They coincide perfectly with dates where my sister, Caroline, checked into the Briarfield Inn." The screen changed again. It showed the hotel receipts side by side with the bank transfers. "And RMO Ministries," I continued, looking toward the bar, "is the private limited liability company of Pastor Lucas Hale." The crowd turned as one body to look at Lucas. He turned beet red. "This is a lie," Lucas shouted, stepping forward. "This is a smear campaign. That money was for counseling." "Sit down, Mr. Hale," a deep voice cut through the room. It was the head of the church elders. He stood up, looking grave. "We have reviewed the documents Ms. Price sent us this morning. Your access to church accounts has been suspended. We are here to hear the truth, not your sermons." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it. He shrank back against the wall. Caroline was trembling. She reached for her water glass, but her hand shook so badly she knocked it over. The water spread across the gold tablecloth like a dark stain. "Maddie, stop," Caroline whispered, the microphone picking up her terrified plea. "Please." "I can't stop," I said gently. "We are auditing the family. Caroline, we have to balance the books." I looked at Graham. He stood up. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at the envelope in his hand. "Wave 2, I thought. "My wife," Graham said, his voice shaking slightly but gaining strength, "told me that we had to protect the family image. She told me that her mother demanded perfection. She told me that Oliver, my son, was the future of this pure line." He threw the envelope onto the table in front of Veronica. It landed right next to the turkey. "That is a DNA test," Graham said. "It confirms that Oliver is not my son. He is the biological son of Lucas Hale." The murmur in the room turned into a roar. People were standing up now. The veneer of polite society was cracking. "You liar!" Veronica shrieked. She slammed the knife down onto the platter. "How dare you! We took you in. We gave you a life." "You gave me a lie," Graham shouted back, turning to face her. "You knew. You paraded that boy around like a trophy, talking about his Price genes, and you knew the whole time he was a bastard born of an affair you paid for." Caroline buried her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. "Mom made me," she wailed. "She said if I didn't give her an heir, she would cut us off. She said it didn't matter who the father was, as long as he looked right." "Imbecile!" Veronica hissed at Caroline. "Shut your mouth." The image of the benevolent matriarch shattered. The crowd saw her now, not the saint, but the tyrant. Her face was twisted in a snarl, her eyes full of hate. "It wasn't just about looks, was it, Mother?" I said. I moved to the third phase. The screen behind me changed. It displayed a legal document. "This is my grandfather's will," I said. Clause 14b. It states that if I, the adopted daughter, produce a biological heir, control of the foundation trust transfers to me. I let that sink in. "I was adopted," I told the room. "My mother hates me because I am the daughter of her fallen sister, but my grandfather wanted to protect me. He gave me the keys to the kingdom, contingent on my first child." The screen changed one last time. It showed the email from Dr. Aris. "The dosage of the K-agent is aggressive. Outcome is almost certainly a termination." 2 years ago, I was pregnant, I said. My voice dropped, becoming deadly quiet. "My mother didn't send me to a specialist. She sent me to her friend, Dr. Aris. They prescribed me a clotting agent. They knew I had a clotting disorder. They induced a miscarriage. A woman in the front row covered her mouth and started to cry. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of horror. She didn't do it for purity, I said, looking straight at Veronica. She did it for the money. She killed her own grandchild to keep her seat at the head of this table. Veronica was shaking. She looked small, withered. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, for someone to nod and say they understood, but she found only disgusted stares. "I had to," she screamed. Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. "You don't understand. You are an outsider. You would have ruined the foundation. I saved the legacy. I did what a CEO does. I eliminated the risk." "You eliminated a life," I said. "Mr." Sterling walked up to the stage. He did not look at Veronica. He stepped to the microphone. "Mrs. Price," he said, his voice grim. "On behalf of the board of directors, I am suspending your chairmanship, effective immediately. Security is waiting to escort you out. There will be a police investigation." 2 uniformed officers stepped out from the shadows of the wings. Veronica looked at them. Then she looked at the crowd. No one moved to help her. No one offered a hand. The friends she had cultivated for 40 years looked at the floor or turned their backs. She looked at Caroline, but Caroline was slumped over the table, defeated. She looked at Graham, but he was looking at the exit, ready to leave. Finally, she looked at me. Her eyes were filled with hatred. Yes, but also with shock. She had never believed I was capable of this. She thought I was the soft one, the weak one. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to her. I picked up the microphone one last time. "You wanted to talk about what we are grateful for," I said. I leaned in close, so only she and the microphone could hear. "I want to say thank you, Mother. Thank you for that miscarriage. Because of it, I finally saw who you really were. I saw what this line really is." I looked out at the silent, stunned room. "And thanks to that, I know I don't want to belong to it anymore. You can keep the name. You can keep the money. I am done." I placed the microphone on the table next to the uncarved turkey. "It is all yours. Veronica," I said. "Happy Thanksgiving." I turned and walked down the stairs. I did not look back. I heard the scuffle of the police officers moving in. I heard Caroline sobbing, but I kept walking, past the frozen donors, past the shocked waiters, and out the double doors. The air in the hallway was cool and quiet. Jack was waiting for me. He held out my coat. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I said. We walked out into the night, leaving the ruins of the Price Empire behind us. The flashing red lights of the ambulance painted the snow in violent, rhythmic strokes. I stood on the sidewalk outside the country club, my coat pulled tight against the wind, watching the vehicle pull away. Inside, my mother was lying on a stretcher, her blood pressure having spiked to a level that threatened to finish what the mini-stroke had started a week ago. I did not go with her. Caroline was in the back of the ambulance, holding Veronica's hand, weeping as if she were auditioning for a role she had already lost. A few aunts and uncles, the ones who still believed there was some scrap of prestige left to scavenge from the Price name, followed in their sedans. They were chasing a ghost. The dynasty was dead. It had died the moment Graham threw that DNA test onto the table. I felt a presence beside me. It was Graham. He had not followed the ambulance. He was standing near his car, his hands buried deep in his pockets. He looked lighter somehow, as if the gravity around him had shifted. "I am going to pack tonight," Graham said. His voice was steady. "I am taking Oliver to my sister's place in Madison, just for a while, until the noise dies down." "That is a good idea," I said. "He should not be here when the news trucks arrive tomorrow." Graham nodded. He looked at the tire tracks left by the ambulance. "You know, when she said that thing about the pure line, I felt sick. I knew Oliver wasn't mine, but hearing her twist it like that, it made me realize something. She didn't care about him. She cared about the label on the jar." He turned to me. "Thank you, Maddie. It hurts like hell. I feel like my chest has been hollowed out. But at least I am not breathing the poison anymore. You saved Oliver from growing up in a lie. You are a good father, Graham, I said. Biology is the least interesting part of parenthood. You are the one who wakes up when he has a nightmare. That is the only line that matters. He gave me a tired smile, got into his car, and drove away. He was driving toward a difficult future, divorce lawyers, and custody battles, but he was driving toward the truth. Jack stepped up beside me. He had been on the phone with Mr. Sterling. The board is in chaos, Jack said. Half of them want to resign. The other half are terrified of the liability. Sterling wants to know what you want to do. He says if you walk away now, the foundation collapses, the assets get frozen, the charities lose their funding. He looked at me closely. You can walk away. Maddie, you have your life in Chicago. You have your career. You do not need this mess. You can let it burn to ash. I looked at the empty street where the ambulance had disappeared. I thought about the $300 million sitting in the endowment. I thought about the scholarships. I thought about the women's shelter in town that relied on our grants. I am not staying to save the legacy, I said. I am staying to audit it. I took Jack's phone and dialed Sterling. Maddie? Sterling answered on the first ring. He sounded breathless. Here are the terms, I said. I did not ask. I dictated. I will accept the position of independent controller. I will not take the chairmanship. I want veto power over every single transaction larger than $100. We are going to publish every receipt, every grant, and every expense report on a public website. That is unconventional, Sterling stammered. That is the price, I said. And one more thing. We are opening a new grant stream, a significant one. It will be dedicated to victims of domestic control and reproductive coercion. We are going to use the price money to help women escape families like mine. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, Sterling sighed. Okay, we will draft the papers. I hung up. You are going to make them pay for their own redemption, Jack said, a note of admiration in his voice. I am going to make sure the money goes to people who actually need it, I replied. Not to pastors with private LLCs, and not to doctors who write illegal prescriptions. Later that night, I went to the hospital. I did not go to hold her hand. I went to close the file. The room was dim. Veronica was hooked up to monitors again. She looked smaller than she had at the party. Without the gold dress, without the stage, without the audience. She was just an old woman terrified of the dark. She opened her eyes when I entered. There was no fire left in them, just fear. You ruined it, she whispered. Everything, gone. You ruined it yourself, I said, standing at the foot of the bed. I just turned on the lights. She struggled to sit up, clutching the bedsheet. The emails, she rasped. The prescription. You didn't show them everything, did you? You didn't give the police the full file? She was begging. For the first time in my life, Veronica Price was begging me for something. Think of the family. Madeline, she pleaded. Think of the humiliation. If I go to prison, if Dr. Aris goes to prison, it will be a stain that never washes out. Please, keep the medical records buried. You have the foundation. You won. Isn't that enough? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sat by my bedside while I bled, who had feigned prayer while knowing she had poisoned me. I felt for the anger that had driven me for the last week. It was gone. In its place was a vast, cool indifference. I am not going to lie for you. Mother, I said. I gave the district attorney the financial records. That is enough to remove you from the board and likely charge you with fraud. And the medical records? She pressed, her eyes wide and wet. I am not going to hand them over on a silver platter, I said. Not because I care about you, but because I do not want to spend the next 5 years of my life testifying in a courtroom about my own trauma. I do not want my baby to be evidence in your trial. She sagged against the pillows, relief washing over her face. Thank you, Madeline. Don't, I cut her off. I am not protecting you. If they find it, they find it. If Dr. Aris cracks and confesses, I will corroborate every word. I am simply choosing not to let you consume any more of my time. You are not worth the billing hours. I turned to leave. Madeline, she called out. I did it for us. You have to believe that. I stopped at the door. No, Mother, you did it for you, and now, you have exactly what you wanted. You are the only price left in this room. Enjoy the solitude. I walked out. Caroline was sitting in the hallway, looking like a lost child. She stood up when she saw me. Maddie, she said, what am I going to do? Graham is gone. The church kicked me out. Mother is finished. She looked at me with that familiar expectation. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted the practical sister, the one good with numbers, to tell her how to solve the equation of her ruined life. Can I come to Chicago? Caroline asked. Maybe I can stay with you, just for a few weeks, until I figure this out? I looked at my sister. I loved her, in a deep, painful way. But I saw the pattern. She was looking for a new host. She wanted to transfer her dependency from Veronica to me. No, I said. Caroline blinked, shocked. What? You cannot come to Chicago, I said. You need to figure this out on your own. Caroline, you are 36 years old. You have a son who needs you to be an adult, not a victim. But family helps family, she whimpered. Family does not use each other as shields, I said. I will make sure the foundation releases a stipend for you, so you won't starve. But I will not carry you, and I will not let you use my life to hide from yours anymore. I walked past her, down the long, sterile corridor. I heard her calling my name, but I did not stop. I kept walking until the automatic doors slid open and the cold night air hit my face. Jack was waiting in the car. We drove out of Willow Crest. We did not talk for a long time. The town faded in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a cluster of lights in the vast darkness of the Wisconsin winter. Jack pulled the car over at the top of the hill that overlooked the valley. It was the spot where the teenagers used to park, the spot where you could see the whole grid of the town laid out below. We got out and stood by the guardrail. The wind was fierce, whipping my hair across my face. Below us, the town looked peaceful. The lights of the country club were still on, but the party was over. The lights of the hospital were steady. The lights of the Price mansion were dark. Are you okay? Jack asked, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. I am, I said, and I meant it. I looked at the map of the town. For 34 years, I had let the people down there define me. I had let them tell me I was the runner-up, the backup plan, the impurity in the bloodline. But the audit was done, the numbers had been crunched, and the result was clear. Family is not about blood, I said, leaning into Jack. Veronica proved that. She would have bled me dry to save a bank account. So what is it about? Jack asked. It is about the people you choose, I said. It is about the people who sit with you in the waiting room. It is about the people who tell you the truth. Even when it is ugly, it is about you, Jack, and maybe, one day, if we decide to try again, it will be about a child who is loved for who they are, not for whose name they carry. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sharp, clean air. I thought back to the dinner table. I thought back to the moment the knife glinted in the candlelight. I heard my mother's voice one last time. Thanks to your miscarriage, our family line remains pure. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. She was right, I whispered to the wind. She just didn't understand why. What? Jack asked. I also want to say thank you. Mother, I said, speaking to the distant lights of the town. Thanks to that miscarriage, I finally saw who you were. It broke the spell. It made me look at the ledger. And thanks to that, I don't have to live my life protecting your line anymore. I am free to build my own. I turned away from the town. I got back into the car. Let's go home, Jack, I said. He put the car in gear. We drove north, toward Chicago, toward a future that was unwritten, messy, and beautifully, perfectly ours. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment your location down below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and revelation, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay safe, and remember, the truth always balances the books.